Awesome. So today I'm really excited about today's series because we're actually going to be inviting a local landlord, an actual veteran firefighter here in the local community. So Eric Hernandez, thank you for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I had a couple questions today kind of focused around sort of like local landlords and recommendations that, sort of energy consultants are making for them to make improvements in their home. And I understand that you recently had Massive, do installation in your home, and I just wanted to ask you some questions about your overall experience working with them. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. And just when we're going through the program, just answer as truthfully as possible and kind of give homeowners as much of your own personal experience of what you've learned. Now, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got started as a landlord.
Let's see. I think it was about 2015 I wanted to buy a home, so I started reading about how the process works, as well as figuring out what you can afford. And they have their calculators online. They say 4 times your income is usually about where you want to be. And I started looking at what I can afford to buy, and then I started getting an idea of how I was going to do this. And then I started continuing my studies in real estate, just casually reading on Google search, and I started seeing a lot of people that were doing this house hacking stuff where they buy a 2 or 3 family house and rent out an apartment or 2, and then that would cover some of the mortgage and make your expenses more obtainable, increase your quality of life and stuff like that, as opposed to having the mortgage come out of your pocket, therefore becoming a liability instead of an asset.
Absolutely.
So it was really just asset generation for me at that point. Once I saw the opportunity to buy a multifamily, I figured that's what I would do.
That's great. So your first property, how many units did it have in it?
My first was a 4-unit, and I just barely made it work. I had just enough money to, borrow, and in the community that we live in, a 5-unit is considered a commercial property.
Okay.
As well, with an FHA loan, which I bought with, because it was my first home, it was, you can't buy a 5-unit, but you can buy a 4-unit as a residential. And so I was able to maximize my FHA benefit to house hack into a 4-unit. And 4-family houses are pretty rare. You don't see a whole lot of them. And like I said, I just barely made it happen. I actually almost didn't buy it, and then my realtor was like, Eric, this is what you're looking for.
You guys were able to kind of like work through the finances and make the budget make sense once you got the tenants in there?
Well, I didn't love it because it didn't have a backyard.
Okay.
Parking was a little bit tight. But, in the process of looking at other homes, she's like, Eric, this is what you need. This is what you're looking for. The numbers work great on this thing. Regardless of where you're going to live in the future, for now, you're going to live here, deal with the parking situation, it's going to be okay. But good luck finding another 4-family house with numbers like this.
Absolutely.
So
now, were there things that you had to kind of take into consideration when you were buying that property? Were there a lot of upgrades that you needed to make to that property that you needed to budget for?
Absolutely. So for me, this was a value add property, and this house was bad. It had tons of knob and tube, no insulation, broken windows, bad tenants, overgrowth. I had a tree growing out of the porch.
Wow.
And it wasn't necessarily, I don't want to call it a neglected property, but it was pretty neglected.
Yeah.
So it needed a lot of work. It was livable, and but it needed a lot of work.
So
it had pest problems.
Okay.
And water problems, from rainwater getting in through a section of roofing and stuff like that.
So what were some of the early fixes that you had to make to that property, and when you were kind of making those changes, was your goal to try to make it as safe as possible and energy efficient as possible, or you're making those improvements?
Right. So the first thing I needed to do was, move into an apartment. And as I got to fixing and painting things, like just getting it ready to live in, I started noticing, the bathroom floor is rotted. It's pretty soft. And I started noticing outlets don't work and they're loose, and, lights and things that should be turning on when you flip a switch don't work, and things like that, of that nature. So yeah, safety was at the top of the priority, so we had an electrician come in and fix a lot of that.
Okay. You mentioned you had knob and tube wiring. Was the knob and tube wiring redone throughout the entire property?
Yeah, at this point it has been, yeah.
Okay.
So when I bought it, knob and tube wiring in this old building is very common, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but it has been known to start fires. When these two wires come in contact with each other, they might not trip a breaker or blow a fuse, and they might actually, glow red hot and light the insulation on fire and things like that.
Oh wow.
So it's always best to update to a Romex.
So Romex, that's the new standard for the codes for electrical.
Yeah.
On there. So we understand that like a lot of times when they're doing energy audits, like what kind of walk us through like your process when you started doing the energy audits and kind of determining what areas of the home really weren't that insulated.
Right. So I heard about this program that Mass Saves runs with insulation, windows, and things like that can make your home more energy efficient. I guess they have loans for heating systems and things like that that really help out homeowners. So I gave them a call, and the first thing you need to do is a home energy assessment, and that's when one of their employees comes out and assesses, the things that your home is in need of. Is this home in need of insulation? Is it in need of a new heating system? Does it need windows? Things of that nature. They'll come by with LED light bulbs and power strips and pretty much just a bunch of things that you don't really care for, but it's part of the bigger picture.
Right.
So
things you don't really think about that often, that light switches and lights and stuff like that you don't typically think about. They're just always there.
Yeah.
Right.
So they, give you a bunch of light bulbs that burn out in 2 weeks and a bunch of power strips that don't work all the time. So, and thermostats, they'll put a new thermostat on your wall and you can program it so that, during times where you're not home, you can program it to automatically reduce the temperature demand. So things like that to help save.
Great. So when you were kind of doing the energy audits on there, and they were kind of looking at the insulation in the home, how did they make a determination whether or not you had sufficient insulation?
So during the home energy assessment, they'll poke their head into the attic space, and they'll drill small holes, and they're real small, maybe a 1/16 of an inch.
Okay.
Or an 1/8 inch tops. And the gentleman had a little wire with a hook on it, and he drilled a hole somewhere that wasn't very inconspicuous, and he swirled around his little wire hook, and he'd pull and see if he was gonna pull out any insulation,
right.
be it cellulose or fiberglass insulation, and he could feel throughout the cavity with his tools whether or not they were insulated. He also brought a thermal imaging camera, and he's able to look at the bay spaces in between the walls and isolate a draft or lack of insulation. And it was pretty cool to see, because you could see a section of the wall that was putting out a thermal image that indicated it was possibly insulated, but then the next bay over was significantly cooler, showing an area that was most likely not insulated, and even showing drafts on the imaging camera.
And you're seeing this all on his imaging camera that's showing all the thermal energy in the home, in the wall.
Right on the device that he was using, he was able to show drafts and a thermal image.
What time of year was this when they were doing this energy audit?
I believe this was in the springtime.
In the springtime, so it's still kind of cool outside, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you guys started to do like the actual estimates and stuff like that, what was that process like when they were kind of walking you through the recommendations and then going over like some of the costs that may be associated with making these energy improvements?
Okay. I mean, he didn't seem to have any costs for me.
Okay.
Everything seemed that it was going to be a benefit that was taken care of by the Mass Saves program. He explained to me the next step was my eligibility. He told me, looks like you got knob and tube. You got to get rid of it. Can't insulate over knob and tube. It's not safe. There's countless reasons why it needs to go.
Right.
So I had an electrician come over the house. He removed all the circuits that were knob and tube, and then he signed off the paperwork, the certificate of eligibility. I'm not exactly sure, but what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
But he signed the paperwork, and then I sent that back to Mass Saves, and they approved it. They approved the building for insulation.
How long did that process take from the moment you submitted it to when work actually started? And this has been several years since you've done this, right?
Right. Yeah. This was the first house. I think this project dragged out for me. I was working full time and paying an electrician about 3 times my hourly wages for him to smoke cigarettes and make a mess, because electricians don't clean up after themselves. Yeah, and so that's part of the trade for them.
So you had to do all the electrical work first, which you had to pay for out of pocket, right?
I paid
that
for
was
that
not
out of
covered
pocket.
under the Mass Save program.
That was expensive. It took time for me to get all
Absolutely.
those projects taken care
And
of.
this was a 4-unit, right?
Yep,
That you
and
were
this was
doing
a
this on.
4-family building.
Yeah, so that's a really big project.
Mm-hmm. Had another issue too that wasn't foreseen is you need to be in good standing with the local utility companies. National Grid, EverSource, I believe that they are the owners or the operators of the Mass Save program, and if you have a tenant in the building that isn't paying their electric bill, or they're on another form of state assistance or something of the nature, they won't insulate your building. Or,
wow.
Or they'll, if they do insulate your building, they'll insulate around that apartment.
Interesting. So that particular unit will disqualify that unit getting insulated?
Right, they disqualified my building at the time.
Okay.
Until that tenant would be in good standing with the utility companies.
Okay. So at that point, as a landlord, you have to kind of make a decision. Do you cover that expense for them to get the whole thing insulated and try to help the tenant, or you have several conversations with the tenant at that point?
Yes.
On there. So that could be a big challenge. So thank you for being honest about that. It's the reality of the world that we live in, right? So, but these I think are things that are important to take into consideration, and it's possible that they might have changed their policies today. Now, when you were kind of doing the installation process, and they actually did start the installation after you passed all the electrical permits and stuff, what was that process like? How long did that take from the moment that you scheduled the appointment for them actually to do the work? And what did they do as far as the overall installation?
That part was pretty quick.
Okay.
There was a company that I used, when they approved me, they gave me a list of authorized contractors that work with their program. And I chose one by the name of Rogers Insulation out of Framingham, Massachusetts. And I said, well, let's give them a call. And, they moved pretty quick. They got me on the schedule for the next couple of months. And over the summer, that same summer, they were able to insulate the property.
Great. And then when they came out to do the installation, what are they doing in the attic and around the walls to basically prepare the space and to do the actual installation itself?
So the framing on this structure was balloon framing, and what they did was they would pull a strip of the vinyl siding on the side of the house, and they would pump the cellulose into that cavity, into the bay space, and they would do that in every single bay, top to bottom, fill it right up.
Okay.
And then they'd plug it, seal it back up, and then put the siding back on.
Oh, so they did it from the outside.
Right. That way it reduces, damage to the interior of the building. In the basement, they sealed all of the sills.
Around all the windows and all the floors and stuff.
I'm sorry, not the sills. The the sills. They sealed the sills in the basement in between the floor joists.
Yep.
They, would cut a piece of styrofoam style insulation and seal it up with spray foam.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, spray foam's great to making sure it seals up any gaps or any areas where you might have air leakage on there. Just kind of the last few kind of questions that we kind of have here is, since you've done these improvements, have your tenants sort of shared with you any improvement in comfort and energy efficiency?
Absolutely. So in the past, tenants would complain about it being very drafty and very expensive to heat and things of that nature. Now the building is more consistent year round, including the summer as well, where you cool it down and it stays cooler for longer, and of course in the winter months the building holds heat better.
Absolutely, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So it definitely was worth it, and obviously your tenants seem to be a lot happier with that too. So other than that, what are some of the biggest issues that you've seen with sort of your heating systems? Have you had to make any significant changes for your heating systems in those buildings?
I have. So when I bought the building, 2 of the units were running electric heat. One of them had a couple of baseboards, but primarily there were these wall-mounted air-blowing toaster-looking thing. It would just blow hot air into the room. And, the tenants let me know that they were very inefficient. They were very expensive to run. And, it wasn't something that I could afford to do at the time, so there wasn't really anything I could do. But as the years went on, I was able to update the systems.
Okay.
And I went with a forced hot water wall-mounted combination boiler. And the combination boiler removes the hot water tank and makes instant hot water, and that circulates hot water throughout the baseboards in the homes.
Wow, excellent.
And that's a very efficient system.
Was that something that was covered through one of the state programs?
It was covered for, it fell into the rebate category, so
Okay.
they were able to give me, I think $1,600 back for a rebate.
And who was able to provide you that rebate?
Mass Saves gave me
That was through the Mass Save program?
Yep, Mass
Excellent.
Saves gave me a $1,600 rebate per unit, and I did 2 units
Excellent.
that year.
That's excellent. So you were able to save a significant amount of money on that, and then also you get the tax credits as well when you apply for those, right? Are you able to still take advantage of those?
Right, so I have a CPA that does my taxes for me, and, as a landlord, the worst thing you can do is go to H&R Block and have them, or Liberty Tax, try to not to get myself sued here, but companies like this, forget I said them specifically, but anyone that's just doing an in and out tax service as a landlord, it's no good for you. You need to sit down with a CPA that knows what write-offs you're eligible to claim, how to calculate, what's a true loss and what's not, and also you have depreciation on assets as well that you may purchase for the homes.
Excellent. So you were able to kind of take all those things into consideration when sort of making these improvements. This is great advice, Eric, so thank you for sharing this on there. Really just the last few questions overall is really kind of, it sounds like you had a pretty good experience working with Mass Save. You were able to take advantage of a lot of the incentives. The insulation was a significant improvement, it sounds like, in your home, and it's not just in the comfort but in the energy efficiency. And then you're also able to take advantage of those additional tax credits of the $1,600 per heating system on there, which is great. Overall, how would you say your overall experience was working with Mass Save, and would you recommend them to other landlords?
Absolutely. I think that they have a great program going, and I think that the projected cost for that insulation project was about $60,000.
Wow.
If I'm not mistaken. And I was paid, I think, a $200 about rebate for doing that insulation. So
it's worth it.
I got a $200 rebate for doing nothing. I spent $0 and was given a $200 rebate.
That's awesome. No, I love to hear that story.
The company that I worked with, Rogers Insulation, was great. They did an incredible job.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing this. And this is not paid advertising.
No,
This is an
no.
honest review. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is great. Just the last question. You know, you work as a firefighter as well, and you oftentimes report to situations, you know, of like unfortunately like fires and floods and things like that. Outside of the home installation stuff, what are some tips and recommendations that you can give to homeowners to just make their homes safer, you know, throughout the winter months and in the spring and summer?
Well, 9 volt and AA batteries. If those smokes or those CO alarms are chirping, all you gotta do is change the battery, and that makes a huge difference in survivability.
Wow.
So an early detection system will help you out tremendously.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed listening to your story. Congratulations on being a homeowner and being able to take advantage of the programs. Any last advice that you'd like to share with the viewers that are watching this, that are considering buying their first homes or are currently making improvements to their homes?
Yeah, I think that if you're looking into buying a home or making improvements, just run the numbers and make sure that the numbers work for what you're looking to do. You can always underwrite into your situation so that you can figure out how things are gonna pan out and make sure that you stay in the green so that you don't run yourself under.
Absolutely. Awesome. Eric, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Congratulations, and again, thank you for everything that you do and for your service. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Anytime.
Awesome. Great job.